And apologies for the confusion about the start time, but one of the things we wanted to get done that was critically important was to get a sort of an overview of the hybrid meeting policy, because our next meeting on August 16th is going to be in person. And so it was important that we understood sort of how things were going to work. So with no further ado, I'm assuming I'm turning it over to Kendra. Is that right?
Yep, that's fine. Thanks, Lisa. So I'm going to be very brief in my sort of overview here, so I make sure to leave some time for questions. And I do have just a couple of slides that I'll show in a minute, but just for some background very quickly, and I think most people know this, but just in case you don't. So before COVID happened, in-person meetings were required by Virginia law, by the open meetings laws. Require all the boards, committees, commissions appointed by the county board were required to meet in person, but there were some limited exemptions for electronic participation at that time. Once the pandemic happened and we all went under both state and local emergency ordinances, we were all allowed to hold meetings electronically or virtually. You're going to hear me use the word electronic and virtual interchangeably. It all means the same thing. And now fast forward, we're at a point, fortunately, where state and local ordinances have been lifted. The county local emergency ordinance will be lifted as of August 15th. Hence why you have to have an in-person meeting August 16th, because without those emergency ordinances, all of the groups, advisory groups, boards, commissions must return to in-person meetings. Now, however, we are returning with and I think, a lot of places are doing this because sort of realize the benefit of having some virtual participation. Oops, I think I did that wrong. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Let's see. Stop doing that. Try that again. So we are going to be holding what we call hybrid meetings, and that is that we're going to be able to offer to the public and to presenters the opportunity to join meetings virtually, even though the meeting body itself, your group, must be in person as a requirement. Okay, so we're starting this sort of hybrid meeting model. We have some people in person, some people virtual. And the virtual option, again, is for the public, members of the public who want to come virtually. They can also come in person, or other presenters that you might have that may not be able to make it in person, they can join virtually. Now, members of the COB may be able to join a meeting virtually under very specific restrictions and conditions. And so I'm just going to kind of go through what those restrictions now. During this time that we were under the emergency ordinances, the General Assembly passed a new open meetings law, or revised open meetings law, that gave a lot more flexibility to electronic meetings requirements than we've ever had. Than we have ever had. It's not as much flexibility as we had hoped, and the county board lobbied really hard to make it so that any meeting body could meet virtually at any time, but that just did not work out. So I am going to share my screen again. Yeah. Can everyone see this slide here? So the ways in which an advisory group, and I'm just going to use that term, I'll just say boards and commissions because it's more relatable, can participate in meetings electronically. The exceptions are all virtual meetings. You can conduct two meetings or 25% of your total meetings virtually, and they cannot be held consecutively. And then there are about four scenarios in which individual members can participate remotely when there's a physical quorum in person. Okay, so I'm going to skip to the next slide. So just talk about all virtual meetings for a moment. You'll see on this section here, it talks about the exceptions for all virtual meetings, and I won't go too far into that, but there are some bodies that can absolutely not meet all virtually. But the exceptions for some groups are you must follow the code, and we'll get into that in a second, and you must have an adopted electronics meeting policy. So again, you can hold an all virtual meeting twice in a calendar year, or 25% of your total meetings, whichever is greater. And it cannot be held consecutively. And then you must provide information on how the public can access that virtual meeting online. And basically, it mirrors exactly what you're doing now, right? The only difference is the time that you are limited to being able to do that. So if you have 11 meetings out of the year, typically, then you would be able to have 3 virtual meetings. That's just an example. Okay, so then we get to the individual members. So again, everyone's required to come in person, but we all recognize that there are circumstances in which a person may not be able to actually attend in person, but they still want to participate. You still may have business that needs to get done, and you need to have, your members there to participate and give their feedback. So over here, I'm going to talk about the exemptions. A member can participate if they have a temporary or permanent disability or a medical condition that prevents their physical attendance. If the medical condition of a member or a member's family requires the member to provide care. So if you have someone who has fallen ill or in the hospital, you need to be there to provide care. That is an exemption that you may be able to take advantage of. This one here, we mention it, although it doesn't really apply to Arlington County, because we do pretty much require that our members of our boards and commissions are residents, and typically we don't have meetings that are 60 miles from Arlington or from a principal residence. But in the event that the member's principal residence is more than 60 miles from the meeting location, then that is an exemption that you can take. And then there's one more, which is if a member has a personal matter, and that personal matter must be identified with specificity in the minutes. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But you can only use that personal matter exemption 2 meetings or 25 meetings out of the calendar year. Okay. And whereas the other exemptions, the 3 here, there's an unlimited, you can use those unlimited number of times. Now I'm going to there's a little caveat about that, and I'm going to come back to it, but just want to point out the difference between the 3 that's listed here on the screen and this one that's listed here, limited in the time. Now, the parameters or the conditions for any of those exemptions that I just mentioned are that a physical quorum must be available to meet in person. So you must have you must have members assembled in your in-person meeting location if anyone is to participate virtually. You must have an electronic meeting policy in place, and the meeting policy, which Mummy has a copy of, and as she mentioned before we got started, she's going to send that around to everyone. I will say that the meeting policy is based off of the law. It's not something that the county came up with. So there is basically no room to make any changes to that policy. It really is what it is based on Virginia law. If you have a question that you want to explore with the county attorney, that is possible, but the chances of making changes to that actual policy are very slim. It really does follow the letter of the law. Okay, and then the requesting member must request permission to participate virtually from the chair in advance of the meeting, and that's typically, as soon as but no less than like a day before, and the meeting. The county board sort of follows this rule of a day before or sometimes an hour before the meeting. Typically, if people have a situation, they're going to know that they can't attend a meeting, but sometimes things happen and, you know, you fall sick and you thought you would be able to attend. But you want to let your chair know as soon as possible, because the chair is going to be responsible for making sure that there's a quorum in the room. And of course, we know that if there's not a quorum, you cannot take official action or an official vote on any matter. You can continue to have, you know, a conversation, an informational session. You can have a training session, but you cannot have any official action occur. All right, and then the last one is, again, the minutes must reflect the reason for virtual participation, and that's, you know, in the case of the personal matter, there must be some specificity in that personal matter. And then let me go back here. In the case of a medical condition, you can say the person has a medical condition. You don't have to say exactly what that medical condition is. So, you know, these are all really designed so it's somewhat limit the amount of times you use this, because well, I shouldn't say that, but you have to keep in mind that, again, because you have to have a in-person quorum and you want to be fair to the rest of your body, you want to use these exemptions when you really need to use them. And your chair has that responsibility of applying these rules uniformly throughout all of the membership. And so, you know, you all want to be able to do your business and you want people to participate, but just keeping in mind that you must have that in-person quorum for anyone to participate virtually. If at some point you lose the in-person quorum in the room, the people who are online can no longer participate virtually. They need to drop from that call, or they cannot vote. You may not be able to finish the rest of your business. These are just some, I'm not going to go through this slide because these are really just talking about some logistical things, and I'm going to see what kind of questions you have. But I do want to mention that there is an FAQ, and let's see if I can get to it here, online, that talks about the meeting policy. If you go to our advisory group page, if you go to arlingtonva.us and then type in the search bar advisory groups, or commission advisory groups, it's going to bring you to this main page. And when you click here, frequently asked questions, you'll get this document that kind of runs down in more detail what I've just explained. So with that, I'm going to hush and ask if you all have any questions.
Thank you very much for all of that. And thank you for your patience in starting a little bit late while we let some of the members come in. So please, if anybody has any questions, please go ahead. With the caveat that we still want to approve our minutes before we start our meeting, which before we start our NACOLE training, which is in like 5 minutes, but we can certainly take a question or two if anybody has it. So please just go ahead and ask.
I have one. I assume that the meeting will be in the at courthouse in the government meeting room. Is that correct, or where will the in-person meetings be held?
That is typically correct. I'm going to defer to Mummy on if she's, have secured spots in Bosman. Many boards and commissions do meet in Bosman, the government center, but then we do have some that meet in other locations such as Sequoia or other community centers. So I would assume that you guys will be meeting in Bosman.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mummy did reserve space in Bosman for the next meeting. We did, as you know, Dave, discuss at some point if we wanted to try and have meetings at different parts of Arlington so that it would be more accessible for other people, but for now, we're going to do it in Bosman, yeah.
Yes, I've reserved one of the new conference rooms that just opened up. It's the Cherry conference room. It's room 216. It's the largest conference room in the building, so the capacity is 27. So I went ahead and reserved it for all of our meetings from now until January. Of course, we may have some of those virtually, or we will also have one at the Academy, but I just thought better to put it on the calendar and have it reserved, and it'll give us an opportunity to social distance and not be, too close in each other's proximity. So that's already set, and I'll make sure that everyone has directions on where to go prior to our next in-person meeting.
Sounds good.
Any other questions on the policy?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So, I know that in the past we've had portions of the meeting that are private versus public. If we're having the meeting in a conference room, how would we have a public portion to the meeting?
It's going to be a hybrid meeting, so it'll be streamed from the conference room.
Okay, so people will be able to maybe interact with us like virtually then?
That's correct.
Yeah, I just want to add to that even though we're offering the ability for folks to participate virtually, you must also have an option for people to participate in person as well. So people have that option.
Okay, great. Which leaves us all of 2 minutes to get the meeting notes approved. So we want to go to the approval of the July 5th and July 27th minutes. So they've been distributed and reviewed. I do know that there was one correction, Mommy. I don't know if you caught that. Did you catch that, Mommy?
Yes, Julie's last name.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's been corrected. Yes? Okay. Awesome.
Yes, it's been corrected, and the corrected version has been publicly noticed as well.
Okay, good. Anything else that anybody noted? Any other changes? No? Okay. So hearing no corrections required, I will entertain a motion to adopt the minutes for July 5th and 27th. Those are the correct dates, right, Mommy?
That's correct.
Okay, fantastic. So anybody want to make that motion?
I so move.
Anybody want a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so we move to the adoption. Thank you, everybody, for being so flexible, and apologies again about the mix-up of the time. All I can say is, little snafus happen. Please always look at the agenda, because the agenda's right. The agenda's always right, because we work on that and make sure that we've laid it all out, but I do apologize for that little complication. Anyway, with all of that, I see the Cammie's here, and we are right on time. So we're really excited, sad to have our last NACOLE training, but I'm sure that we will be seeing or talking to Cammie many times in the future. So Cammie, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. And yes, we kind of like a bad penny. We just keep turning up. You won't be able to get rid of us that easily after this evening. We'll be around for some time to come to help with questions as they arise. I know that you all are, still in the first phases of getting everything up and running, and so we would like to be able to help where we can, and things that come up. So let me go ahead and get my PowerPoint started here. It's great to be with all of you again this evening, even though it is our last time for this series of training. Before I get to the introductions, I just wanted to see if there were any questions from our last training that had come up since. Any comments that people wanted to make before we jump into this evening? Okay.
Maybe I did have one quick comment / question.
Yes.
And I don't know, it could possibly like come up during the conversation tonight. So it might just be setting the tone, if you will.
Okay.
During our last training, when we were going through kind of the ingredients to a good investigation and the things that, you know, we should be mindful of, I just thought that I wanted to maybe ask for some input from you, or some clarification, or maybe open it up for a discussion about how the investigation and some of the things that are done in, like, let's say in that particular example that we had, it was a criminal investigation, might have had some civil, you know, aspects as well, but let's say a criminal investigation, and just how the purview of what officers are doing in a criminal investigation overlaps or is different from the purview of us as an oversight board, right? Like, I just wanted to kind of point that out, because as I was thinking about it afterwards, I was wondering, you know, how we differentiate wanting to reopen a criminal investigation, or, you know, put on like officer hats, versus which you kind of do a little bit in the context of like you're evaluating whether a proper investigation was done and what the officer knew when he took certain actions, or he or she. But I just wanted to kind of like differentiate a little bit how the purview from the oversight lens is a little bit different, just like in the same sense of like a district court might hear evidence or evaluate evidence differently than an appellate court, for example, because the record is the record, if that makes sense.
Great. Well, so I will say this, that most of the investigations that are either done by independent investigatory oversight entities or those that are reviewed by them mostly fall in the category of administrative investigations. We're talking about whether or not policies and procedures were violated. What becomes very important is that civilian oversight in that realm does not impede on any criminal investigations that are occurring. In many cases, in many cities, the administrative investigation and review kind of sits to the side until the criminal investigation is done, because you don't want to tread on that in such a way that could inhibit the ability of any charges being made if they needed to be made, or just in general inhibiting that investigation. So if in hearing you right, one of the things that will be part of your policies and procedures that you will be putting together as you start the work of the board and the office is to really figure out in concurrence with your ordinance is when your authority stops or has to pause so that it doesn't overlap into criminal matters until those are completed, so that there isn't any damage that's done, and what that kind of looks like. I know that some ordinances also and people's bylaws or policies and procedures also talk sometimes about, you know, if there are personnel matters and making sure that all of the policies within the city are also being followed, so that all of those things kind of follow in line together, so not one part is trumping the other or inhibiting the outcome of the other. I hope that helps, Mummy.
Yeah, that's actually a different aspect even. So you kind of like took it to the next level of what I was asking, which was more so about like just making sure that we're all clear about what our scope is or what our lens is from the vantage point in which we sit. But I think it was also really powerful to just kind of amplify certain limitations that we may also experience when a criminal investigation is underway. So you definitely said it way more eloquently than I probably could have. So I appreciate that clarification.
Absolutely. And I also, when you get to that point and you're really looking at how the ordinance sits in the reality of the work, I'm happy to help with finding examples of how that's handled and how the language sits that tells you how to handle those things as they come about. So just when you get to that point, let me know, and I'm happy to jump in and help.
Thank you so much.
Further.
I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Great. So with that, I am going to quickly introduce to you, well, actually, I'm going to turn it over to him to introduce himself. He does a much better job of introducing himself. But tonight I have brought with me Brian Core, who some on the Zoom may be familiar with. But Brian is the past president of NACOLE and also is an oversight practitioner in the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brian, to tell them a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, thank you, Cammie, and good evening to everybody. It's great to meet this new board. It's very exciting. So as Cammie said, I'm Brian Core. I live and work in the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, although I will tell you right now, I'm in California visiting my sister. So we haven't seen each other since COVID started. So I'm not in my usual location. I'm a little off my schedule, so I apologize in advance if I get a little fuzzy at any point. But I have been involved in the work of civilian oversight, initially as an organizer at the ACLU of Massachusetts back about 14 years ago, or no, 15 years ago, and then I have been working for the city of Cambridge since 2010 as director of our civilian oversight agency. I got involved in NACOLE very early on. It provided invaluable support to me in my work, and I eventually ran for the board of directors, was elected, served 3 years as the elected president, and currently, in addition to doing civilian oversight in Cambridge, and have been doing work with communities across the country. I'm actually out in California to do some work with the city of Santa Rosa, north of San Francisco. But I had the privilege of working with the, I can't remember the exact name, but the Civilian Oversight Subcommittee of the Policing Reform Task Force in Arlington County, then later presented to the county board as NACOLE started working to help the county develop what you are today. So that was longer than I intended, but just to say that I have some history with Arlington County. I'm really, really glad to be here. And it's just really exciting to see something go from an idea of people considering making changes to a real live body that is getting training and getting ready to embark on the work of civilian oversight. So I'm really glad to be here. And thanks, Cammie.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks for joining us while you're not at home. So I appreciate that. So, and I'll just skip my introduction. I feel like we've all gotten to know each other quite well over the last 3 sessions. So tonight's session is primarily on identifying and addressing challenges and opportunities in civilian oversight and particularly in your community. And I'm going to turn over Brian, who will be leading that discussion. But I wanted to also just talk about, I don't know if all of you have had a chance to look at some resources that are on our website that I think are just great additional resources, particularly for those new to civilian oversight and even those of us who've been around for a while. Last summer, we released a project that was funded by the COP's office that we worked on for several years. And the main piece of this is a report on the state of the field of civilian oversight of law enforcement. And the second part of that talks about the principles of effective oversight that we talked about in our first training session, as well as specific effective practices. Now, I will say this is not an exhaustive list of effective practices, but it definitely gives a good start. As we start to work on the next edition someday in the future of effective practices. But in addition to this, and I actually sent some of these to one of you earlier today, there are 9 case studies. There are 3 that deal primarily with an auditor-monitor model, 3 that deal with investigatory models, and 3 that deal with those agencies that are primarily review models. But I will say mixed in there is a whole lot of the hybrid. Denver is one of them that is a very similar model to yours, where it has the board and a monitor who work separately but also in conjunction. There's also Indianapolis and the Los Angeles Office of the Inspector General, Philadelphia. Now, I will say some of these, since the time that we've published these, their models have gone under some changes. Like Philadelphia, I think from the time we started the project till now, it's in its 3rd iteration. So there are some changes, but for the most part, it gives a great overview of the different types of models, how they got to where they are. New Orleans is another great one that I suggest that you look at. And in addition to those case studies in the main report, in the report, you'll find a lot of analysis of data that we've pulled from several different surveys that we've done of civilian oversight. We've also taken that data that we've collected in our survey of agencies specifically and put it in a civilian oversight agency database, which can be found on our website. So it's a great way to do a search where you can find all of the similar models that you have, see what kind of budgets they have, see a lot of times they've included their policies and procedures as downloadable documents, or they're enabling legislation. And so I just wanted to make sure that you all know that that existed. The best way to access this information is to go to the NACOLE website, click on resources, and it's the first tab under the resource drop-down list under recent reports, and you'll be able to find connections to all of these things there. So, and I still actually, even though I helped write the report, I still use it as a resource as I'm doing my work and also as I'm helping other cities. So please feel free to take advantage of that and then ask me any questions you might have later on once you have a chance to look through it. So with that, I will turn things over to you, Brian.
All right. Well, thank you, Cami. Again, just want to reemphasize the point that that report and the case studies, and there's also an executive summary, are incredible resources. So I'm sure you've heard before about the President's Task Force in 21st Century Policing report. That's a very important thing to read, but I think this piece is actually even more important, these pieces, because they are so specific to the work we do. And there's such a variety of models and types of oversight and things people think about, but that report is an incredible resource. So just look at that, go back to it, and yeah, it was amazing to be able to have that come out. And with that, let me jump into the slide I'm supposed to talk about, identifying challenges and opportunities. Now, a lot of times when people are involved in doing this kind of work on boards, you know, whether it's a nonprofit board of directors or municipal or county board or commission, people think of things like a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths and weaknesses? You know, what the opportunities and threats, trying to be very strategic about it. And I think when we're doing this part of our training, the idea is more to look generally at the environment that you're in. And I will apologize because my sister has a very loud dog that seems to, it's almost like it hears my voice and it decides it wants to talk with me. Well, I guess
we can't really hear it that much, so don't worry.
Oh, good. Well, I'll try not to. I appreciate that. Thank you. So, but again, this is really to think about from where you sit in Arlington County, the situation that you're in today, the history of your county, the people who were pushing for change in policing, but also all of the stakeholders. This is really thinking kind of holistically about what are your challenges and opportunities as you embark on this work. And it's something that I think you'll want to revisit from time to time, not every 6 months, but you know, we'll talk a little bit more about this. But as time goes on, you have a brand new model. You're going to see how it works. It's a little bit different from every other model. I'm sure you've heard before. Every oversight agency and entity is unique. And so you'll have to figure out, what do we do as we're going along? How do we figure out how to do the work we've been asked to do, how to fulfill our mission, how to respond to changes in the environment that we work in, whether that's locally or nationally. So this is not a one-off, not a strategic plan that you make and put on the shelf, but it's really a way of thinking that we encourage oversight agencies and board and commission members to be engaged in. This way of thinking about what are the challenges and opportunities. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So stepping back, why are we here? So you will see on this slide, I'm going to read it, Sankofa, the necessity of looking to our history and knowledge gained in the past to make positive progress in the present. Some of you may be familiar with the concept of Sankofa. It's a concept that we at NACOLE hold very dear as part of really our founding as an association. And it comes from the West African nation of Ghana, from the Akan people. And the image you see is often called the Sankofa bird, but it's a symbol of a bird with its feet planted, heading forward, looking back. Often the image will include an egg being carried, which kind of represents the future. And inside that egg, which is sealed, there's a future that you don't know. But as you move forward to the future, remembering your past, you have to keep all of that in mind so you can be moving forward, but rooted firmly in the present. So again, this is I'm tired because I haven't quite adjusted to West Coast time. I'm not on East Coast time. But Sankofa is a really important concept in many cultures, and in oversight, I think it's particularly important because we come to the work based on our personal experiences, based on the community experiences, based on our history. And it also is something that is happening in the present, but is, of course, charting a course for the future. Others will follow, others will look at what you're doing, how you've done it, learn from you in ways that maybe you think you could have done better, but more importantly, you're really setting the tone. And to do that, you have to think about where you're coming from. So you're in Arlington County, I'm not, but whenever we do this, I always want to kind of think a little bit about the history to prompt you to think about the history of the place that you are. So I would imagine many, or maybe all of you know some of the history of, I'm sure you know about the District of Columbia, how it was separated from Maryland and Virginia, and that at some point, what's now Arlington and most of Alexandria was given back to Virginia. But there's a complicated history about retrocession, which involves people who were merchants who felt that they were not able to really do their business as well, but also people who were slaveholders across the Commonwealth of Virginia who were concerned that the state legislature might abolish slavery, might make it illegal to hold people as enslaved persons. And those two votes in I guess it's the House of Burgesses, I think, in Virginia, I can't remember at that point, were essential to keeping that majority. And so part of the reason Arlington County is not part of the District of Columbia has to do with the history of maintaining slavery throughout the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. And then you think about the name Arlington, right? The county recently changed its logo because of the association with Robert E. Lee and Arlington House. And thinking about the fact that this general of the Confederacy had his house overlooking the District of Columbia, and that Arlington County named after that house. And what does that mean? The history of historically Black neighborhoods in Arlington, Freedmen's Village, Green Valley, going back, almost 180 years. These neighborhoods that existed so close to Washington, D.C., in Virginia, in a state with slavery, and still maintained over many generations. And yet we know, as Arlington County suburbanized, like much of the nation, many of those historically Black neighborhoods were taken over, urban renewal happened, the expansion of the federal government, specifically in the capital region, taking over areas, and how the areas that had been historically Black were often targeted for freeway construction. And as those things happened in Arlington, there were very real effects and impacts. And there are, of course, people who live in Arlington County today whose families were there, who know those stories as personal history, and then people who've heard those stories from their friends, their relatives, the move to gentrification that's happened in cities all across the country. And certainly as someone who lived in DC briefly in the 80s a couple of times, as I continue to go back to Washington and Arlington and Alexandria over the decades, just to see the continual changes, the way that people have been displaced, positive changes for many, positive changes in some ways for all, but negative changes. And when we come to the more current moment, to some of the things that led to the creation of this board, you think about what happened with the mutual aid situation in Lafayette Square. Again, I'm not going to try to tell you what happened, but you know, that history of Arlington County law enforcement being called in to Washington, D.C. in support of, I won't even try to characterize it, but what happened in Lafayette Square in D.C. I'll just leave it at that. So we know that this history is long, and at the same time, it's very real and present. And so as you think about all of these things in your own ways, from your own personal perspectives, listening to the community, thinking about why this board was established and what does Arlington want? And that is a intentionally ambiguous question, right? Because Arlington is a very diverse community. That diversity has increased. And so people want very different things based on all kinds of identities, life experiences, areas that they live in. And so as you do this work, always be mindful of what will be your legacy. What will those who come after you 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 50 years from now, someone in some future world doing some kind of presentation talking about the history of Arlington and talking about your board and the work that you've done and the role that you've played. Thinking about what that legacy will be should always be part of what you're doing. Okay, so if we can go on to the next slide, please, Cami. So as you do your work, you will definitely have challenges. I think all of us in civilian oversight face very complicated challenges. I know in my own work in Cambridge, it's an interesting community. It's considered very liberal. It's much more diverse than people think. And we have had a lot of challenges. We've had challenges in terms of how people think about our work, in terms of what expectations are, and many others. Now, I will say again, I'm perhaps overly transparent. Sometimes we've done this where we've asked people to speak. It seems like everybody's off camera, so I'm thinking I should just continue talking, and this is an invitation to Cami to let me know if I should be inviting people to participate, and I'm not seeing that invitation. So,
well, no, Brian, actually, sorry. I think that if people would like to participate, they were warned that you might force them to do so. So
good.
I think they're probably prepared if they do want to contribute.
And please don't, we're all here.
Okay.
So I turn my camera off because I think it's distracting for actually the person who's presenting. So, but we're all here and yeah, so.
Okay. Well, that's great. That's great. Now, thank you, because I can't quite see everybody, but I can see some people now. So I would ask you to think about what are some of the challenges that you feel like you face in your work. You know, we have a list that we have prepared from our own experiences and from other communities, but really, in just sort of popcorn style, people can unmute and just say, what are some of the challenges that you see that you are facing in this work?
We don't have enough time to get everything done as quickly as we'd like to get it done.
Okay,
so not enough time. What else?
One other challenge that I would identify is it's inherent in the current status of Virginia law, but we don't have a formal, well, our executive session authority is very limited to getting advice from counsel. We actually don't have executive session authority to discuss sensitive matters. I mean, we haven't started our work yet, but that's going to be an issue, I think, at some point. And we found it difficult. I found it difficult to not literally be able to sit down in a room with the entire board and just sort of talk through the initiation of how we want to get things started and get things going. I mean, yeah, so I found that hard to get used to. We've kind of, you know, emailed in little groups and so forth, but it's harder than I thought, frankly.
Okay, so just literally the ability to have open conversation about sensitive and confidential topics.
Yeah, and we're not allowed to meet in groups of more than 3. I think that is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, literally. I mean, if there are 3 or more that meet, whether it's a sensitive topic or not, it needs to be a public meeting. It needs to have an agenda in advance. And so, you know, even I mean, the open meeting laws, the FOIA laws in Virginia are very strict, to the extent that, you know, even rapid fire discussion on email could be considered a virtual meeting. So, you know, it's just a new landscape for figuring out how to get things started with folks who I haven't met in person yet, some of them. So, you know, we'll figure it out, but it's been a little harder than I thought.
Okay, so there's a set of structural challenges that maybe I would characterize as being part of a governmental body. You know, I work for government, but I'm someone who served mostly on nonprofit boards, and it's definitely a very different environment. So definitely appreciate that. So what are some other challenges? I mean, people have talked about some of the structural challenges of your work, but what are other challenges you see facing as you do your work?
I think we have some perception challenges to overcome. I think that, you know, both from the, you know, police perspective and the public's perspective, like creating this board, in my view, mostly proactively to, you know, create a more proactive engagement and build on the, you know, police department's responsiveness to not just community needs, but community values and a much more deliberate identity. I think that when you talk about it from inside of this board and inside of our process, there's a lot of obvious value, but I know that we have some, you know, skepticism and, you know, reluctance from inside the police department, and also, you know, from the community thinking that, you know, do we need this? Is this necessary? So I think that perception challenges are inherent to anything sort of new, but certainly something I've noticed in unfolding some of this stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, I'll kind of combine all the above with a learning curve is actually quite steep. It was great. We all had a chance to get to know each other fairly quickly and learn about each other through bios. And as impressive as all of our background is, clearly as there is a new board. This is a new board, and we are all new to community oversight, as you kind of started out with the introduction. And there's a bit of a learning curve to what I thought was already a general understanding of Arlington County Police, for example, but we've learned an incredible amount through well over 100 hours of training cumulatively so far, and NACOLE is another part of that training. So there's a bit of a learning curve here so that we're as best prepared as possible when the time comes.
Great. Nope, absolutely. All right. So who else? What else? What other challenges do you face? People have now talked about structural and kind of being a new entity coming together, skepticism from law enforcement and other stakeholders who sort of feel that policing is going great in Arlington County. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What other challenges?
I think one thing might be, and I don't know, I don't want to step on anybody else, but it is learning where the rubber meets the road. I mean, I believe that we will find that out as we go forward, but you know, learning what the most important community concerns are. I mean, I don't really know for sure what they are yet. I mean, I have some ideas, but so that's part of our work in process where we're going to be able to hear from the community. But I know that it takes more than just put out a website and sit back and wait for the community to contact us. I mean, I think we have to be, as Julie said, proactive and figure out, you know, we have to learn not only the police department, which we're learning, but also the community. And, you know, I don't think any of us know the whole Arlington community. I mean, that's part of the interest in this for me, is actually learning about more of Arlington County, where I've lived since 1996. But it wasn't really until sort of the mid 2000s that I, you know, as my kids got older, I really, because I work in DC, and most of my attention was in DC, and Arlington was kind of a place to live, but it wasn't some place that I focused on as my community until, you know, last 10 plus years. And so this is a great opportunity for me to learn more about the entire county. It's a fantastic place. I mean, I think there's so many good things going on in Arlington, and I'm looking forward to, you know, being part of increasing the connection between the community and the police.
Okay. No, thank you. I will say I can't quite see everybody who's on, just because of where I am and how I'm doing this on my Mac, not at home. But so I want to ask people, one, if there are people who haven't spoken yet, but also, you know, thinking about what are some of the expectations that you might find challenging, if there are any. So just I want to open that line of conversation up a bit.
I mean, part of what I have run into in the ride-alongs is that, you know, the expectation that there are feasible solutions. I mean, one problem that, you know, was sort of touched on by many of the officers who've given us insight into, you know, how the different groups within the police department work are understaffed and have been understaffed for years, and, you know, fighting with, you know, combining that with salary, you know, competitiveness challenges, especially since Amazon came in. But that as an example of, you know, when 3 to 5 of them per shift are tied up with either mental health, you know, patients or COVID patients, that, you know, all of the folks I spoke with, you know, reiterated that and then said, but there are no good solutions, you know, so I, again, you know, as a work in progress, but the expectation that there are near-term and workable solutions, you know, a lot of this is evolved through, you know, different attempts at different solutions. And I think that can be a challenge coming up with. I think usually when you look in hindsight to what effectively solved a problem, it was creativity. And that sometimes just takes time and collaboration, but from the front end, it can look a little daunting.
Right. I appreciate that. Okay, I see another camera coming on. So what do you see as challenges? What do you? I should probably ask people to say their names. That might just, you know, I know you all know each other, but.
Hi, my name is Gary. I think when I signed on here, I don't think you can see my name, but I'm Gary Dean. I'm the vice chair. So this is kind of my what I see as the biggest challenge, and looking ahead, and some of it is not something that we have a lot of control of right now. It's just the reality of the situation of trying to come together as a team and develop, collaborate. So my biggest challenge is once we are qualified, once we complete this training, that's been very outstanding. The training is outstanding. But once we complete this, I personally believe, with my experience, that most of the team building, so if all of a sudden we have to come together, you know, God help it doesn't happen, but, you know, the reason that they hired us, there is something that just unforeseen happens, and we have got to do what we were chartered to do. And it's my experience and belief that most of the understanding each other happens not talking about COB business or not in a training session, but just getting together and learn each other and what our strengths and weaknesses and passions. So, you know, for instance, you know, we have a wide variation of age groups. We have the young guy on the team. We've got various different experiences, and I don't think we really understand our strengths and weaknesses, or just different viewpoints. And so all of a sudden, if we come from a Zoom setting, and are going to have some, face-to-face things, but they'll all be training. It's not the type of things where people really get to learn, trust, understand different viewpoints. And so all of this, so that's the challenge. We all of a sudden being thrust into a situation where now we have to collaborate face-to-face. It's a difficult situation, and we don't even know each other yet. That to me, that's kind of what I see is, and I don't have the answers yet. I know we're working through this together, but it's how do we build those relationships that I think are not built in training sessions. There's some I'm listening from each other in the training session, but it's just sitting down, having a pizza together or something. No COB business, no, just humans learning each other, because I think that's very important when you get to a difficult decision and, investigation, or where we have to bring these different things together towards something that's best for the community, that's best for our purpose and role. That's a challenge. We're going to try to work through that. I know we've got some ideas, but I think in a normal setting, we would have been farther down the road in just the basic humanity of starting to understand each other. That then enables, when you get put into a situation, those are the building blocks that allow the training to lead to a very good result.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I do think that it's, and you mentioned a number of things, but one of those challenges is we're still doing things in a pandemic. We are still working in ways we're not used to as human beings. And I will just, I'm trying not to editorialize. I will say that I actually think that when you get together in person, it will be a bit easier than you think, just because I've seen groups of people just who have not met naturally connect in person, including the board I staff here in Cambridge. When people finally we had a bunch of new people and they finally got to meet in person. It was actually fascinating to see how quickly people click together. But I don't want to promise that, but be heartened. I think that as vice chair, you'll hopefully find that easier than you may anticipate. And, Cami, can we go to the pre-prepared list? Because I think people have talked about a number of things. And there's probably a couple other ones I'd like to bring up that I think we've seen before. So I'll kind of run through these. And some of these have definitely come up. Very high expectations. I think people haven't gone into this in as much detail, but, expectations from those who've appointed you, from community activists, from law enforcement, from people who may have skepticism. We'll talk about that a bit. One thing I haven't heard so much is fear of change. And I don't know if that's just because it hasn't come up yet, but I think in a lot of communities that has really been an issue for people who, as you've said, someone said, things are working pretty well. We've got a progressive community and we've got great people doing great work. And for other people, it's, how are we going to make changes in a way that works? Community trauma is something that we talk about a lot. I, in particular, talk a lot about the role of trauma in this work. And I think every community that I've been involved in, including my own, we're dealing with the community trauma of the pandemic, of people who've lost people, of just disrupted lives, and even people who sort of everything's been fine in their personal life. It's still been very difficult. And it just, as we know, it goes on and on. So that has exacerbated lots of things. And then in many places, there are specific traumas. There are histories of law enforcement misconduct, of officer-involved shootings, just the long legacy I sort of talked about earlier. People did mention skepticism from law enforcement, and that is a universal. I just got back a week ago from the conference of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, which are generally more interested in oversight. I was with the panel presenting on civilian oversight. There's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of who are you to judge us? And that's part of why the training is so important. 100 hours may seem like a lot, and yet you will find it invaluable. There are going to be a lot of things as you go through your work like, oh, this is why they talked about this. This is why the what do you call it? The county, attorney talked about this issue, or NACOLE, or the law enforcement agency. I didn't hear too much about the lack of understanding of oversight and its role, but I think this often comes up because people will make assumptions about why you're there. It may be why they want you to be there. People may want you to be finding officers guilty and prosecuting them and punishing them. Others may want you to be exonerating officers and putting out press releases. And then others will think that you are specifically there to judge people, or because you're there against the police. So you will find you probably have already found, there's often a lack of understanding. And part of your job is to help people understand what you're doing and that you're impartial. Now, again, I haven't worked at this group, so I don't have a sense of each person, but often it can be a challenge for people coming into this work to understand what it means to be impartial, not from the sense of what does that mean, but how can we be impartial when we've been put in place because people see problems and concerns about policing and law enforcement, that certain communities don't feel that the public safety systems are creating public safety for them. Having legitimacy with both sides, kind of talked about that, and it's an ongoing challenge related to impartiality in both positive and challenging ways. The need for training, I actually think that Arlington County has done a really good job creating a robust training program. And you will find there's still a need for more training. In addition to kind of living into what you're doing, you'll discover that there are things you never thought of. That's part of why NACOLE is still out here. And we've got our annual training conference, both in person and online. And there are other training resources, but that need for training won't go away. And it is a challenge because you all have lives. This is not your full-time job, at least people on the board. And it can be challenging, but it's really important to continue to do that, like any professional work, that ongoing professional education, continuing education development. Again, I haven't heard as much today, but I know in some of Mooney, do you want to say something?
Yes, sorry. I always forget to unmute myself, even though it's like almost 3 years into the pandemic. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I usually just try to be in the practice of like stepping back and letting other folks step up, particularly COB members, and letting this be their space to, talk and converse and share their ideas, since there's such limited opportunity to do so. But I think just to kind of encapsulate, I think I've heard it in a little bit in what everybody has said, but I use this metaphor a lot, and I think pretty much probably everybody on this call, with the exception of you. And Brian, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Mami Ibrahim, the independent policing auditor. So, I serve as professional support staff for the Community Oversight Board, and I onboarded after the COB was commissioned. And so coming on board and both learning my colleagues, and also we're now collectively, although I'm doing it full time, obviously, so leading it, but collectively in terms of like collaboration, setting up an inaugural structure for Arlington County, which requires a lot of the like administrative and structural and training things that folks have mentioned. I think like one big theme for me is this like prioritizing, and that is both internally and externally, right? So internally, the metaphor that I've used a lot is like, we've all moved into this house together, beautiful home in a brand new neighborhood. We're getting to know the home, we're getting to know the neighborhood. There's like boxes in every room that need to be unpacked. And like, we're trying to figure out how to do it. What's the best method to do it? Should we go one room at a time? And what room do we start with? And so metaphorically, we started with training, which Jim likes to refer to as the kitchen, which I think is a great metaphor, right? Because he's like, everybody's got to eat. And I'm like, that's absolutely right, Jim. Everybody's got to eat. So let's all start in the kitchen, get this training done. But also, there are other pieces that are simultaneously moving that I'm trying to like spearhead and just get kind of like set up as a structure, so that once training is complete, there's, at least a framework for an intake system, a framework for an MOU, that sort of thing. But I think like just trying to make sure that we spend enough time with each room to make sure that we're setting up a system that it makes sense, that's efficient, that it's going to be sustainable, that it's not something that there's going to be some trial and error and some adjustments made, but just something that is going to that is like well thought out and sustainable, so that we're not having to make a ton of adjustments along the way. And I think that requires you to really like be able to sit with it, right, and understand like what is the framework of this, what is the objective of this, how is it done, what are some other models, what are some trial and errors that other police oversight boards have done. And one thing that I think like with prioritizing, there is pressure because there's like a timeline by which we need to, do certain things per the ordinance. I think that we have that the county has communicated to us that there's some flexibility here and there, but also we are accountable to the community. So it's understandable why like folks want to make sure that things are done in a timely manner, but really organizing these structures and creating systems that are not just structurally sound, but also well informed by ACPD, by the community, by all of the various stakeholders, and that there's a collaborative process. It takes time and it has to kind of marinate a little bit, if you know what I mean, like for it to get to the right level of ripeness for it to be launched. And so I think that that's a priority. And then that's just all internally, right? Like externally, then you're going to be going out and like listening to a lot of different concerns and priorities from different people in the community and having to figure out a way to outline a plan that addresses all of those concerns in a way that makes people feel heard and valued and equal. So there's, I think the theme across that is just, outlining priorities, but maybe different concerns or different methodology behind like internal priorities and external priorities. So I've been talking for a while, but you get my drift.
Well, no, I do. And I'll just say, as an oversight practitioner in a community with high demands and expectations, I totally hear what you're saying. And I think one thing I will just sort of reflect quickly is that I think for the board members, know that, again, this is a little bit off the slide, but you have different roles, and you have someone who's a professional this is her full-time job, and she's clearly thinking about like all the different pieces in the balance. So you certainly want to all be thinking about that and aware of it. And certainly if you're the chair and vice chair, you have some specific responsibilities around shepherding the process and the meetings, and know that you have this resource who is devoted to doing this. So there's a way in which some of these questions or these points on here, like attempting to meet all the demands, you have a partnership in that. And so you don't have to take it on completely yourselves as board members. And I will say, I think that tends to be one of the hardest things, is that we do this work because it's so important and because we care and we want to get it right and we want to do right by everybody. And sometimes it just feels overwhelming. I mean, generally in government, maybe in life, we're asked to do more than we can really do. So that prioritizing, that sequencing, thinking about, which room to unpack first, how are we going to live in the house before we're fully unpacked, is really important. And again, just to emphasize, that's why starting with training. It can be easy to say, well, let's dig into the work and then we'll kind of get the training once we know what we're doing. You got to, step off on the right foot. And so I think the last thing on this slide, I just want to mention, and I don't know how much people here feel this because I haven't heard it yet, is this idea that some stakeholders think that others can't be engaged. And maybe another way to put that is that, we're here for X, and, this other group, they have a powerful voice. And we need to balance that out, and sometimes people say law enforcement, they're powerful, they've got a seat at the table, they dominate things in government, they've got a voice, so this has to be for the community, however that's defined. Other people can say, well, the community activists, they're loud, they control elections, they get people appointed to the board, the county board, and so we have to make sure that we're taking care of the people who do this for a living, the law enforcement practitioners. Others may say that, the elected officials, they've got a voice. Others may say, so it's really important to balance this ability to hear all the voices and to never feel like you're here for only one person or or even that there are sides. I think one of the things that's most important for me in this work is that everybody in Arlington County, even people who just, they come into the county to work and they go home. They come into the county to shop or, you know, hang out, or they're riding the metro through. I know there's a whole separate metro police and all that and board, but they come into your community as well, and they're all stakeholders. Of course, I always say law enforcement is a key stakeholder. And one of the things that I will say Arlington County did right from the beginning was having law enforcement at the table, not dominant, but they had a seat at the table from the beginning. And it was, I think it was important and useful for the people involved in the task force to have that voice, to be able to hear and also talk with and engage with. So really just remember that everybody who's a stakeholder, which is everybody, needs to have a seat at the table in a sense, you need to be able to hear their voices and do your best to understand their experiences. You know, Cami, I'm doing lots of talking. I don't know if there's anything I have skipped or anything you'd like to emphasize before we go on to the next slide.
Why, thank you, Brian. As a matter of fact, I do have something. I just wanted to jump in and let those of you know, I mean, as you were talking about the challenges that you were facing, I wanted to let you know you're not alone, that review boards, commissions all over the country, particularly when they are starting a brand new entity, or even if they're a new member coming into an existing entity. You're right, there is an enormous learning curve. You know, even if you have the best intentions coming into the role, most of those of us who go into those roles don't have knowledge of many of the things that you are now tasked with making important decisions on, with reviewing. And so there is a steep learning curve, but again, you're not alone. And I want you to know that we hear those concerns, you know, not only the learning curve, but, you know, having to do a ton of training that may not all seem pertinent or at the moment. As Brian and Mummy have mentioned, I think that I myself am someone who wants to have a list of things that I complete and get them all done. And having to stop and do something else in order to cross the thing off that is on the list, particularly those with deadlines, is very difficult. But again, you're not alone. This is part of the establishment of oversight practice and being setting yourself up for success in the long run. And I'm still thinking about your comment, Gary, about, you know, wanting to know everybody and understanding everybody and their roles and how they respond to things. I think that is a real want anytime we're working with groups. And I just want all of you to know that a lot of this will fall into place as things move forward. But in the meantime, I definitely, the facilitator in me wants you to know that I hear what you're saying, and to know that there are others out there that experience the same things, but also there's those out there that if you continue to have some of the concerns, that can talk about their experiences as they've been bringing in a new board or commission, bringing one online, and how that they've dealt with some of those issues too. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we moved on to what is actually the more exciting part of this conversation, the opportunities.
Yeah, and so before we go to the next slide, I saw Lisa Ortiz raised her hand.
Yeah, so that's right. I never introduced myself. You have no idea who I am. Hi. I'm sorry. So I'm
it's okay.
the chair. Yeah, so I'm just raising hand for procedural reasons. We want to take a break at some point, and I'd put it down at 7:30, but I leave it to you when you want to take it. It's just like a 5-minute break. So I didn't know if maybe you want to do it now before you went on to the next big piece, or you want to push it off. It's up to you, but just to put that out there.
Well, Cami, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. I was just going to say this is probably a good stopping point. If you'd like to go ahead and take the 5-minute break, that is absolutely fine with us.
Right. And I'll just say, and when we come back, we will be thinking about opportunities. So maybe as you take your break, while you relax, also have it churning in your mind. What are some opportunities that you see for the work of the board? But let's take a 5-minute break then. Thank you,
Okay,
Lisa.
great. So parliamentary rules. So I need someone to make that motion. Somebody on the board would like to make a motion for a 5-minute break?
I so move.
Oh, thank you. And anybody want to second that?
I second it.
Okay, great. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's 2 people. Come on, folks. I know you're out there.
Aye. Sorry.
Awesome. Okay. And
Wow. So
great. Any opposed? No. And any abstentions? Great. Okay. So 5 minutes would bring us back at, if I can do math, that would be 7:33. 7:32. So see you all then.
Okay.
Brian.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Brian. It's Lynn Porphyry. I just wanted to say hello and thank you so much for being here tonight. I think you might be on mute or I can't hear you for whatever reason.
Yes, I did mute myself.
Anyway, I hope you're doing well. And
No, I am.
I just want to tell you on behalf of the county and the PPG, the task force, how grateful we are for what the insight and guidance you provided us to get us to this point.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. No, I mean, it really has been a pleasure to work with all of you. And please give my regards to Mark. I haven't talked to him quite a while, but yeah. And Mummy, it's nice. And I just want to make sure I'm saying your name right, so I don't imprint improperly. Mummy?
It's mummy, like an Egyptian
mummy. Mummy, okay.
Yeah, with an I though, not a Y.
Yes, okay. It was nice to meet you. I know of you, and I saw the announcement when you were brought on by the county, so it's very exciting. And you know, just think of me as a resource. I'm happy to be of help. You know,
thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate that. I've also heard nothing but amazing, wonderful things about you, and it's just an honor and privilege for us to learn from you tonight and to have you as a resource.
All right. Well, thank you. You're welcome. And I should probably take at least
take your break. I just wanted to say hi.
I just last week at the Noble Conference met the new director for Fairfax County's Police Civilian Review Panel. So in addition to Richard Schott, who's the auditor, they now have Stephen Richardson. So I'm going to try to keep in touch with him and help support him in the work too. But I should probably try to connect you guys at some point. So yeah, he comes out of a law enforcement background, so it's very interesting. It's just interesting who comes into civilian oversight these days. I love it.
Take care.
All right.
Enjoy your
break. All right.
break.
Thank you. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks for coming on to say that.
No problem.
Okay, I know that was the fastest 5 minutes ever, but we are back. It's 7:32. So I just want to turn it back over to NACOLE whenever you're ready.
Do we have Brian back?
I'm just hopefully connecting my AirPods, so hopefully you just heard me speak.
There you go. We can hear you.
Good. Okay. All right, so welcome back to part 2 of the exciting NACOLE training on opportunities and challenges. We're so glad to have you here tonight. So, so in all seriousness, so opportunity. So we're going to try this again. There are lots of different ways people can think about opportunities, and it's, we have a list that's pre-populated that reflects what we've heard in our own experiences in other communities. And I see there's a hand up, and I don't know if that's a hand from before or someone who would like to say something before we launch into.
Oh no, that's my fault. I forgot to put. Sorry, I forgot to put my hand.
That's okay.
If I can figure out how to put my hand down, or I can talk. So
yes, what do you see as opportunities, Lisa?
Okay, I will.
One or more.
Seize the opportunity. So, I mean, one big opportunity is that I see or hope is that we will increase the conversation between the Arlington Police Department and the community, and just, sort of the level of understanding. I mean, I must say myself, from the ride along and from the trainings, I really didn't know as much about how Arlington County sort of approached policing, or just the basics of what my, friendly neighborhood local policeman or woman would do. So hopefully a big part of what we'll do is help to increase just that communication and familiarity and understanding that may not be there for some people.
Okay, so, and when you say, you mean you're thinking about the community, not just for members of the board?
No, yes, that's what I mean.
Okay.
By the larger Arlington community, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. Other opportunities, large or small?
I, work in engineering, so everything to me is that sort of technical flow, but like everything we do is needs driven, right? You don't need to just go buy new technology. You need it because you have a need. And I think that one of the opportunities that I have been most grateful for as a board member is learning so much more in detail about what the Arlington County Police Department does in each sort of specific vein of its, functional jurisdiction and its efforts to identify and address problems. So I think that, maybe a specific element of what Lisa said is increasing the visibility of, how much the police department is aware of what community challenges exist, and then really filtering to identify like where are there outstanding gaps, and then I guess the associated opportunity to be an independent inlet for information from members of the community who may have issues or needs that are not being fulfilled, but they have not had that comfort or trust maybe to go to the police and communicate those needs to the police directly. So I think that opportunity for independence is really valuable, and also to fill gaps in what does seem to me a very deliberate and intentional approach. But I think that independent perspective adds value.
Great. All right, I know there's more people, so other opportunities, again, specific things, opportunities for engagement, opportunities for change. What opportunities do people see that this board has?
I also think that something Chief Penn said was very valuable about, there's an opportunity to benefit from national best practices and learn from what other folks have done well. And we certainly want to do that. But I also think there's an opportunity to divorce our approach to policing from, an inherited legacy of responsibility, and make it a much more tailored, what kind of community identity does Arlington have and want to have, and what values you know, does that include, and how does the police department respond to that, instead of just, you know, this is what we've understood as the role of police because that's how we, you know, read about it or saw it in movies, or that's how it was done, you know, when our grandparents were children, and really create that deliberate sense of identity.
Okay, great. Thank you. Looks like David has raised the virtual hand. So, David?
There we go. Yeah, and I think what I'm saying is amplifying what others have said already. But one of the opportunities for the board is to present a communication vehicle to different parts of the county that maybe haven't had success with the existing ways of communication. I mean, I do think the police have done a good job of reaching out, making themselves available. But I think Julie alluded to this as well, which is, and it takes sometimes more, it just takes a different perspective. I mean, the police can do what they can do. And I mean, I'm impressed with the police. I think they've done a great job, but at the same time, they acknowledge that they can do things better. And having a third independent party, us, to provide a way for the community to express its satisfaction and or mostly, you know, dissatisfaction. I don't mean mostly, because there is a huge amount of dissatisfaction, but it's out there. And I don't really know as much as I want to about both dissatisfaction and satisfaction. And so having us as a third independent vehicle, if you will, for communication is a huge opportunity. And one of the things that's happening to Arlington is it's becoming more urban. I mean, compared to, you know, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, certainly. And I like what you said earlier about the history. And I think there's just a great opportunity for us to engage with the police and the community and sort of to create a closer bond. And you know, it's easier said than done. The devil's in the details, and we'll have to, you know, figure this out to an extent as we go. But honestly, the resources that you guys are providing, and I haven't read the two monographs that you referred to at the beginning, but I will look at them for sure, because I'm sure that they're very, very helpful. So again, the opportunity is to provide a way for members of the community to articulate what's happening to them in a way that doesn't exist now.
Great. All right. No, thank you. So as I kind of invite others to join in, especially again those who may not have spoken, just thinking about, you know, not to guide you, but thinking about some of the things that we just heard around people whose voices may not have been heard, increasing communication, and I guess thinking about the sort of some of the reasons people around the country have been pushing for civilian oversight. You know, again, just thinking about what are some of those opportunities, maybe because of positive things that are going on in Arlington County, or resources you have in addition to the very existence. So, but I think I saw Gary's hand go up. Oh, I got it right.
Yes. Yes, you did get Gary's hand is up. So, yeah, everything that the past two people said, I agree with. One of the things, I was able to have coffee with one of our members, you know, trying to get to know each other the other day. And so one of the topics that really came up was, so let's talk about the independent COB. So obviously when we get to and that independence provides a voice that otherwise people may not share, just as Julie and David have said. But really, prior to any event, okay, you know, a bad day in Arlington leading to a complaint, or just a complaint not even after a bad day, that, you know, we're able to do our independent investigation. But to me, prior to that, and this is the real you know, how each county does it, that I think is really, personally, which is my personal opinion, is prior to an event, to me, the only independent piece is this other door that we provide with our community engagement, you know, the things that they might not otherwise share. But I think as they share it, I mean, I really see we have two main constituents prior to, prior to a complaint really doing that action they've asked us to raise our hands to do, get trained and learn to do. And I think it's the community, and I also think it's the police. And so it's something that I'd like to talk about more, not just with you, but with our teammates regarding the police currently right now is as much to me as one of our constituents as the community, because it's really all three of us together that really are going to make the difference here. And so case in point, we find something out that otherwise they may not find out. It's our ability to communicate and work together. That's not something we hold in tight, you know, like we're playing a game of cards, but it's how we, ahead of an event, work together. And that may not necessarily be, the independent piece may be collecting, but what we do about it, to me, is a team sport. Police, community, and COB. And so, it's really this, we have to be careful what independence is for. Collecting, I totally agree with it, just as what's been said. But once we get data that they may not otherwise get, it's our working together with the police chief, with the other, you know, main agencies in the police force, and, you know, the community, to work through these things together and to share instead of waiting for an event to occur.
Great. All right. No, thank you, Gary. And so that makes me just sort of think about, you know, again, I don't want to lead people on, as it were, but, you know, I've heard a couple of different versions of, you know, hearing those concerns and kind of bring them to the police. But, you know, I'm wondering, to not go too far off my script, what maybe are some of the concerns that you anticipate you would be bringing to the police? I mean, I've heard, you know, impression of the positive work the department's doing, the ways in which it is really trying to meet the need, and that there are also unmet needs and concerns that haven't been heard. I mean, you know, not to get into a 10-minute thing about, well, I've heard this, I've heard that, but just what's the sense of people in this group, generally or individually, about what are some of the concerns and what are some of the opportunities you will have to help policing and public safety improve and help the voice of individuals in the community be heard? Let's see, I see there's some hand raised. I can't quite tell from here. Oh, maybe that's still Gary's hand. So
I was going to say, I
yeah,
think
please.
one of the opportunities is, you know, to me, it sounds like the Arlington County Police actually have a pretty good idea of at least where and somewhat what kinds of people and groups in the community they lack, you know, the trust of. So, you know, increasing that trust, you know, understanding their concerns specifically, but, you know, some of the types of concerns I think I've seen or heard expressed are to do with, you know, unnecessarily focusing on geographic areas and, you know, again, sort of carrying forward assumptions. I think that there are a lot of, you know, folks who feel like, I think there are a lot of folks in Arlington who have the impression that there isn't much crime in Arlington. And so that leaves the police to do, you know, enforcement that is maybe not so much public safety oriented. I'm not saying that I necessarily share these concerns, but I think that, as I said, I think part of our opportunity is to increase the visibility of what efforts the police not only have made, but are willing to do to improve that trust, but also then to prevent, I think there's an opportunity of us to prevent police activity or to steer and redirect police activity that can increase the effectiveness of working with those groups. I know that Alexandria has adopted the dual responder model, working with, you know, mental health professionals. And I know that Arlington County has been, you know, developing that plan to implement that. But I think that there are opportunities for us to help redirect some of that activity so that where, you know, there is a public safety need and there does need to be police activity, it's done in a way that doesn't reinforce concerns or mistrust of police and to sort of build that. I also think that
Mhm.
having an oversight board is an opportunity to increase the police understanding and recognition that they are, even if they don't live here, members of this community, and that the community needs their best. I don't get the sense from the ride-alongs that I've done that anyone's driving around not doing a good job, but I also know from DOJ reports and other sort of best practices that a lot of times it is a culture or a practice problem. Like, one thing I read about was when officers, that one common cause or attribution of excessive use of force is if a police officer responds to an incident immediately after leaving the scene of a traumatic or high intensity incident. And so, being in a position to respond to multiple things and keep your cool and, stick to protocol can be troubling. So I guess I see our opportunity is to improve those, policing, not just individual practices, but the culture and the ability to support our officers so that they're able to, bring their best and make sure that we don't accidentally reinforce behaviors that feed that mistrust.
No, great. That I really appreciate that. Thank you. And there's a lot of broader issues that are affecting policing nationally, and of course they affect every community and every department. So I just want to invite, not to put anyone on the spot, but I think that maybe Martin or Annika, I don't think that I've heard your voices, and so it's an invitation, not an obligation. But if you want to jump in and add something about opportunities that you see or you're thinking about, I'd love to hear your voices as well. But
okay, this is Anika.
Anika, excuse me, I'm
yes,
sorry.
It's okay. Everyone had touched on majority of the opportunities that I was thinking about. So I'm still because I know I can think of something. I just want to make sure that okay, yeah, let me come back because the majority of the stuff has been said already. It's like I don't want to repeat everything that someone else said, but I'm here. Okay.
Okay. No, I appreciate it. Again,
no problem.
Anika.
Yes.
Anika. Okay.
Yes.
I apologize.
Okay. No problem.
And then I don't know. I think I said I don't think I heard from Martin yet. I don't know. No pressure. Okay, well, that's not working. No, I'm kidding. So I guess, though, I do want to raise up before we put up our pre-populated slide. I'll just say generally, I mean, in a lot of communities, I'm thinking back to some conversations I had with someone from the Arlington NAACP, from some of the meetings with the task force that, the police practices group, I think it was called. There definitely were concerns about some of the national calls that have been calls for defunding the police, and how there might be people in Arlington County that's kind of the perspective they're coming from, or people who are really feeling like the people who are most impacted by the challenges of society or by problems in policing, by uneven enforcement or uneven response, how those voices haven't been heard generally. And I don't know if that's something, so again, I'm sort of, seeding the clouds a little bit, but just wanted to throw that out as something that maybe some people are seeing opportunities around. And I see a couple hands raised. So if you've raised your hand, please go ahead.
Okay, so this is Anika again, and I'm not sure if anyone said it, and I didn't hear it, but opportunities for the police department or representatives of the police department and representatives of the COB to have town hall meetings with the community to see, just hear straight directly from them without having to, go through multiple sources or the paperwork that holds things up and whatnot. So if that's an opportunity that we all can get together, so it's not, it could be an environment that's more informal, because everything, when you do things so formally, people are hesitant to come in and actually want to participate and be a part of the community, because it's not us against them. That's not what the COB is supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be the COB, then the police department over here. It's supposed to be a joint effort with the community as a whole. So just throwing that out as an opportunity to do something of that nature, a town hall. I don't even know, do we even have town halls in Arlington? Is that something that we hold quarterly?
Well, if you don't, it could be.
I don't know if anyone on the board knows or not, if that's something that we have, or if that's something that we can look at in the future, if anyone on the board knows.
So all I'm going to say is that I have thought of, we've talked about this. I think this relates a little bit to what Dave had said very early on when some of our first meetings about trying to have meetings in different parts of Arlington so we could hear from different parts of the community. So that's not exactly a town hall, but I guess I've called them sort of listening sessions. I don't know what you would call them, but I think we definitely want to do that. And I don't think there's any reason we can't. I mean, there's nothing that would prohibit us from doing something like that. So yeah, I mean, yes, I definitely think we're all hoping to do that sometime soon. So we're with you on that one.
And also, you know, if that's an option, you know, people in the community, we can actually break it down to different sections, different communities, because everybody, you know, people who live on this side of town are not going to want to come. We want to make sure that we hit every area and let them know that their voices and concerns, because their voices and concerns are different from if you live in the 2207 area code versus 22201 area code. Like there's two different issues and concerns within the community as far as policing and the safety. So I just think that's an opportunity to be hands-on and to really sincerely, you know, it's not something that's check off the box kind of thing. It's a sincere outreach to the community to let them know that this board was created with their best interests in mind, and not just something that we just check off just to say, look, we have this.
Yeah, I'll just say, again, trying not to editorial switch, I think those are all great points. You know, it may or may not be something that everybody on the board sees necessarily from their own personal lived experience, but to be able to keep that in mind, that there are people who will be kind of judging the legitimacy of this board based on whose voices are not just, you know, invited, but you actually are going out into communities. And I'll just say part of the reason I'm out here in California is to do that very work in Santa Rosa for a couple of days to do some community listening sessions. So it can be a very important part of the work. So I see Martin's hand, which is great. And then I know it's 5 minutes before 8. So I realize, I'm not sure if you guys were all thinking we're going to 8 or 8:30. I was thinking 8:30, but let me first call on Martin and then we'll keep going. I'll show the slide and we'll move forward. So Martin, please.
Hey there. Sorry, I was having issues with my mic on my computer. So, but I heard you, and I do have some info.
Awesome.
So honestly, I think overall, this will be a great opportunity to just increase the visibility of, you know, I guess, not just the police department and how the processes work there, but also with, you know, now that we have an institution that might hold them to account in certain instances, to also, you know, reassure the people who live in this county of that. And so I think that's probably the biggest opportunity here that we have with the COB, in my opinion.
Okay, no, that's great. I thank you. I appreciate that. Again, I mean, I won't try to repeat what you said. I think you said very well. So thank you. So Cammie, let's just pull up that second part of the slide. I think I'll just take quickly. I'm not going to try to analyze each item. So I will say it was very interesting doing this with your group, because it was a little different from some of the groups that I've worked with, even in Virginia, and it may just be a matter of time passing and where you are. But I know people had really thought about how important it was that the Commonwealth law is now allowing every municipality, county with law enforcement agency to create oversight. That the ongoing community trauma that people have gone through, from the pandemic to policing to everything else, that you have support from government in Arlington County for oversight. That's not true every place, so don't take that for granted. I sort of, led people on about, not led people on, I led people to talk about things like calls for reform, centering those most impacted. Multiple people mentioned that the opportunities involve things that will demonstrate legitimacy of the board, that you can have a role in changing policies and procedures. I think that a lot of that led into this idea of creating something sustainable and engaging all stakeholders. And I will say that I don't think anyone specifically mentioned defining the role in work and outcomes, but I think that is an opportunity that you have. I sort of talked about that before, and that you are the inaugural oversight board, and you have a chance to define something that will live on after any of you as individuals is involved directly in this board and in this work. So, and again, before I go on, I want to see if Cami, if you want to add anything, since you've been doing this work with the board.
No, I think that everybody has given a great list of the opportunities, as well as you.
Thank you. All right, so let's go to that next slide, and which you were about to do before I called on you. So this one, we could talk about for a while, and I don't think it needs to be a big giant discussion. But I do think that as you are thinking about the future and creating something sustainable, again, I'm not going to try to go around and ask everyone to answer all these questions, but really that strategic looking forward, what are going to be your results? What are the things that you really want to be doing? People talk about a lot of things that are possibilities, about the influence you could have, about supporting better policing, about helping communities feel engaged and helping the police department hear things they might not hear. And then thinking about what are the things that you'll do to know that you've done that. What are going to be your expectations? Again, you have a partner in Mummy. From my experience, you have strong support from the county all the way up to the county manager. And in that work, what are you going to be looking at to measure your own success? Where you're going to be communicating to county leadership, to the county board, to the community, to everybody, all of the stakeholders about how you're going to measure that success, and thinking really carefully about that. One of the challenges in our work in civilian oversight is how do you measure it? And again, to go back to the report that the report and executive summary that NACOLE did with the Department of Justice, with the COPS office, it's a complicated thing in our work, but there are a lot of things in there that can help you think about that, because it's often not how many complaints did we get or how many times were the complaints sustained, but are people, it's qualitative. How do people feel about the services they're receiving? How do they feel about their interactions with officers? How do officers feel about their interactions with the public and their interactions with the county in general? Thinking about how you really get those diverse voices, and as I think people, from what I've heard, really are already committed to actively listening to and honoring all of the voices and perspective, and as people say now, lived experiences that people have. It's not just people with negative experiences, it's people with positive experiences. And as you do that, really being conscious of your own biases, really being conscious of where do you maybe have some blind spots? Where do you have things that you're not as conscious of? What are the kinds of things that can get in the way of really hearing from people? And then how do you authentically listen to and bring those voices into your work, to the police department, to the county government in general, and reflecting back to the broader community, so they know that they're being heard and they know that what they're saying is informing your work and the work of the county. It's also really important, I think, in this work to avoid binary thinking. And again, I'm not getting the sense from our conversation today, my lecturing at you and you're responding, but our conversation today, that this is a group of people that sees things as one side against the other or a binary. Often in this work, that's one of the challenges that we at NACOLE have seen, is that people may come in feeling like, as I think it says before, we're on the side of the community, we have to stand up against law enforcement. And I'm not hearing that. And I think that that's very positive. And just as the work continues, as you hear from people about potentially negative or even really negative experiences with the police, as you're hearing people talk about positive experiences with the police, as you're hearing from officers, from leadership, avoiding falling into that kind of binary thinking, even if that's something that the individuals you're hearing from may have based on what they've gone through or their own biases. So really playing that role of listening to everybody, being neutral, and staying true to the broader mission. That's part of sustainability. And without getting into kind of negative stories, I think in the last 6-7 years, we've seen oversight be formed in communities where there are serious problems. It's really in response to officer-involved shootings or serious patterns of misconduct. It may even be where the Federal Department of Justice has come in and done a civil rights investigation. Say someplace like Baltimore, not very far from you, where there are deep problems. And so in those places, it can be very hard for people not to fall into those patterns. So I don't necessarily see that as a huge problem that you face in Arlington County, and yet it's still something to be mindful of, because that's where I think those kind of situations are where oversight has had problems being sustainable. Expectations weren't met from all around. People felt that they weren't able to do the job that they were put in place to do because they're thinking that they're on an oversight board to, root out the bad apples and prosecute police, and that's not what they're there to do. So again, I say that to provide context, and mostly to say, I think that you're actually in a good place. You've got good support, you're building good relationships, you're on the verge of going out there and doing the work and getting the information and seeing what's happening. But that's a big part of sustainable oversight. So I see a hand, and then after that, I probably want to go to the next slide, but I think, is that Julie?
Yeah, I just want to, reflect back and emphasize hearing the importance of that point. I think you're right. This community and this group of people has not demonstrated much of that binary thinking, but it was described to me recently. I again think that the way we use our language can be so important in these roles, because it does reflect our sort of embedded and sometimes implicit biases. But, it was put to me that there is so much us and them going on in America in so many different contexts and all this stuff. And really the only solutions are going to come from we. And I think that as community oversight board members, it's really important that we are everyone involved, right? Like, we have to think of ourselves as partners of and members of, law enforcement and the Arlington County community, that the solutions are going to be those that are not trade-offs. They're not, negotiating so that everyone compromises. They're coming up with creative approaches to make sure that everyone benefits and, the whole equation is improved. So I just sort of like the way that was framed, that in lieu of what has become a really us versus them conversation on, not both sides in our community, but in the larger sort of political and politicized discourse about this topic on the national level, that at our sort of resolution, maintaining that language of we, and we are all of the stakeholders involved, can be really helpful in just like shifting the way we think about the solutions, that we are really everyone involved.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, obviously it resonates with me and my thinking from what I've said, but I think that's a really important point. And it will be important to kind of have that as a touchstone, because again, this is training, you're getting to know each other. If at some point the going gets tough, you want to have that as a touchstone that you go back to. So I think we should probably go on to the next slide. And again, I'm conscious of time and I can talk a lot. So and I think we actually talked about this a little bit along the way, but just really as you do your work, and this is really the last content slide, you want to be thinking strategically, right? It sort of says it right here on the screen. How can you build on opportunities while addressing and understanding the challenges? In a sense, it's kind of obvious, but sometimes in the rush to do the work and the meetings and reviewing documents and the training and the meetings and the life, it can be, you're just sort of showing up and doing what you need to do. And sometimes that's all you can do. But you want to also be thinking constantly about, you know, how can we build on what we're doing, not just do the work today. How do you build legitimacy with all stakeholders and goodwill for the future? Again, I think people have really spoken about this already. My sense is that you are in a good place to do this, and you just have to keep that in mind, that, you know, it's not the kind of thing in this work where you kind of do it once and everyone's like, oh, they're great, okay. Because this work, even in a place, I mean, I think about Cambridge, where we generally have relatively few complaints and a progressive police department that really has tried to meet the demands that our society places on it. It's still, you can just be one bad encounter away from losing the trust of a huge part of the community. So you want to be always thinking about how are you demonstrating that legitimacy so that if something happens, that goodwill is there. As you do your work, again, we've sort of talked about this before, there's a lot. There's a lot you could do. There's a lot you might think you should do. There's a lot you'll be asked to do. And so just being clear about priorities and what can go on the back burner, that unpacking the house analogy again, which I love. And then, you know, you're brand new, right? So as you go through your work, you'll have to be thinking about how do you adapt to conditions to achieve your mission. And, you know, sometimes that means really as a board, and I think as Gary kind of talked about, getting to know each other and understand who you are, but then also as a group, you know, what do you see as your mission? There, you know, there are documents, there are resolutions, there are ordinances that are very specific. And of course, within that, you have to be thinking about what is it you're trying to achieve, recognizing there's more than you can possibly do, recognizing you have to have priorities. And so as you do that, you may always be working within the establishing documents, but you may be adapting and focusing your work in different ways so that you can achieve what you're there to do. So I guess with that, I think, again, conscious of the time, let's just go to the next slide, which is one of my favorite slides. So this first image, this is by an artist named Ricardo Levins Morales, but it's a slogan you may have seen before or heard: nothing about us, without us, it's for us. It comes out of South Africa, where youth activists and disability rights activists adopted it. You hear it more in this country today associated with the disability rights movement. But it's really true, I think, for everything we do. And again, this idea of multiple stakeholders. So nothing about us, without us, is for us. And then, again, you may have heard this. This is a quote from an Australian Aboriginal activist named Lilla Watson. If you have come here, if you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And I like that so much because to me, it just really speaks to why we're here. Whoever we are, whatever privilege we have, we all face some type of oppression. And maybe if it doesn't feel like oppression, we face ways in which our humanity is challenged, or we lose pieces of our humanity. And so that idea of liberation, I think, is universal. So having said that, I think that these are really important things to keep in mind. And I think that's, there might be a little bit more on that slide, but I think that's about the end of our formal presentation. I'm going to stop and, again, turn it back over to Cami, who Cami, you've been so lucky to have Cami to work with. I've worked with Cami for about 10 years, and so she's great. And I just think that I appreciate the opportunity to join her tonight, share a bit with you, get to meet you all a little bit, and hopefully I can be of support to you as you continue your work.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's always a pleasure being able to share a screen with you. And I really appreciate all of you feeling allowing yourself to share some of your thoughts about the challenges and opportunities that you're facing. And in doing so, kind of sharing the vulnerability that you feel at this moment as you're trying to make this successful and do all of the pieces that are required of you. So thank you very much for feeling comfortable sharing all of that with us this evening.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to give everyone another opportunity. If you have additional questions or comments, leave some space for all of you for that.
This is Dave Smith. I don't have any questions, but I loved the quotes at the end, Brian. Thank you so much. That was great, very helpful. And yeah, those quotes are fantastic. Really appreciated that. And thank you for, sharing your experience and your knowledge.
Thank you. I appreciate that, David. Dave.
Both. I go by both.
Well, thank you again. And as I did mention earlier, we are not going far. We are an email away. If you have additional questions, we're here. So as you get ready to jump into the next phases, as you complete your other training, as you just think about the things that we've talked about over the last 3 sessions, just please feel free to reach out to us at any point.
That's great. Thank you, Cami.
Absolutely.
Yes, thanks so much. This has been really helpful. And as several people have mentioned, we haven't had the opportunity to talk with each other that much. So these NACOLE trainings that have allowed us to share some thinking and, as you said, Cami, vulnerabilities is really helping to bond us as a group, even though we have so many challenges right now. But in any case, again, I can't thank you enough. And but I'm sure we will be bugging you again very soon.
Good.
So we know.
I hope you will.
We know how to find you. So. Right. So thanks again for everything. And yeah, we look forward to working with you in the future.
Great.
So for us COB members, we just, you guys can leave. You don't need to, we don't need to bore you with our housekeeping, but for the rest of us.
Thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
That was great.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So we're actually ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. So we didn't really have anything much more except basic housekeeping. If anybody has any questions or thoughts, I did want to mention again, first of all, I'm sorry about the mix-up about the time. But as Mummy mentioned, we didn't have control over the meeting that had been sent out. So please always check your agenda. And of course, once we get past the training and we have, we're able to set up our own meetings, we will start being more, consistent probably about our times and stuff like that. But always just check the agenda, because the agenda will always have the start time correctly. But in any case, I really appreciate everybody's ability to jump on early, for those of you who didn't realize we were going to start early. And I don't know, Mummy, are there other things we wanted to mention in the housekeeping?
Yeah, also, I want to take responsibility for the Teams meeting mix-up as well. I normally set up the COB meetings, the Teams invite, but this one was already like pre-set for the NACOLE training, and it wasn't until right beforehand that I realized that the meeting time was still set for 6:30. Otherwise, I would have flagged it a lot earlier. But so I also want to take responsibility for that and thank everyone for being flexible enough to join ahead of time. Yeah, I think just as far as housekeeping, just want to remind everyone to reach out to Captain Chamberlain to set up your ride-alongs if you haven't done so. Those are extremely important, and ICPD has gone to great lengths to make themselves available for us. And Captain Chamberlain is super responsive to requests and can, accommodate your schedules if you just communicate with her what days are good for you, and she'll be able to advise you, what days might be good for specific shifts and that sort of thing. And we want to definitely extend ourselves and get those scheduled as a demonstration of appreciation and wanting to, get those taken care of. And also, if for any reason you are, running late, or you need to make a scheduling change or anything like that, just be mindful of communicating that as early as you possibly can beforehand. Captain Chamberlain's personal cell phone number is listed in your confirmation email when you schedule it. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see her personal cell number. So she's definitely made herself accessible as well. But just being mindful of the fact that if we are late or we miss our ride-alongs, that there are officers who are being taken off of their shift to accommodate our ride-alongs, and we don't want anyone to be, waiting for us or not reporting to their, regular beat or their duty because they are because one of us is late or something of that nature. So yeah, just making sure we take care of that, and also making sure that you log on to the Learning Center. Prior to any ACPD trainings that we have, there's usually a video that's uploaded onto Learning Center. They're usually no more than like 5 minutes. So just watching that beforehand so that you have a little bit of context for the training that's going to happen. And then I'm working on trying to get the recordings up on the Learning Center so that folks who have missed previous sessions are able to log on to Learning Center and watch those, and then it'll be documented that they have attended those trainings, just for purposes of making sure that our training is complete. And the last thing I will say is just to make sure that everyone is staying up to speed, like for in the moment updates that are sent out to your county emails. At this point, I think we're exclusively using county emails to communicate. I certainly am only communicating or sending out information to people's county emails at this point, just for consistency and making it easy for people to not have to look for information about, COB meetings or agendas or minutes and that sort of thing. It's all going to go to your county email. I would strongly encourage everyone, if you haven't already done so, if you're not like somebody who's constantly in front of your laptop, to have the Outlook and the Teams app downloaded onto your phone so that you can check your emails regularly and get notifications. Calendar invites and that sort of thing will be like more accessible to you if you're able. It just may not be a habit for people who don't use Teams in the course of their everyday work to be checking it. So just getting in the habit of doing that so that we can all be on the same page and stay up to speed on any updates. I will always send out the agenda and the meeting minutes from the prior meeting, but they are also publicly posted on the COB website. If for some reason you can't find it in your emails, it's also on the Teams channel in our meetings folders. But 3 different ways to find the information in case, for some reason you can't find it in one place or another. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that that information is in 3 different places. I think that is it for me for housekeeping. Let me know if I missed anything.
Let me also chime in that, again, we mentioned August 16th is our in-person session. So that's going to be session 4 with Arlington County Police Department, 3 hours blocked off, which includes a tour of AC of Arlington County Police Department, which is going to be really, really cool, and also within the command center. So looking forward to that. That's going to be part of it. And then also some classroom instruction as well. And we'll wait to hear probably from your team of where we will meet up, but no doubt it'll be close by, so we can quickly or walk over and get into ACPD headquarters tour. So all that's forthcoming. Looking forward to seeing everybody on the 16th, person, live.
I know, that's going to be exciting.
And I see that Anika's hand is up. So Anika, did you have a question, or did you want to share something?
I did have a question. I only completed 1. How many ride-alongs do we need to complete? Is it just 1, or people just doing multiple just because?
For the ordinance is 3.
Oh, it's 3.
Yeah. It's 1. It's, yeah. So there's the recommendation from ACPD is that we do a morning, an evening, and a midnight shift so that we're able to see and experience what the different shifts are and what kind of opportunities and situations they present.
Okay, so let me kind of get myself back on the schedule with them then. Okay.
Thank
well, I
you, Anika.
apologize.
I appreciate you jumping. Oh, no worries. I appreciate you jumping on top of that. I'm sure Captain Chamberlain will be happy to schedule those for you when your schedule permits.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for all of that, Mommy, and obviously always thank you, Jim, for all the help and support on the training. Any other business, any questions, anything else anybody wants to bring up before I ask somebody to make a motion that we can adjourn?
I will say one other thing too, sorry. Just that, I think we've said it, in different ways throughout the meeting or hinted to it, but don't be afraid to, step up. If there's something that you're particularly interested in giving input or feedback on, we could certainly use as much collaboration as possible. I know like these circumstances don't allow us to interact as much as we'd like to in a collaborative fashion, but I definitely feel like we get to know each other more when folks are taking on different levels of participation outside of the meeting. So I strongly encourage you, if there is something that you're particularly interested in, like just let me or Jim or Lisa or Gary know, and we can definitely, I'm sure there's a list of things that like we can find for folks to get involved and help with. There's just so many different levels of expertise and like specific, professions and just knowledge in this group. So I just want to make sure that we're always utilizing that to the best of our ability and also using it as a way for us to collaborate with one another.
Yeah, I completely echo that. I mean, we have, the training that Jim and Julie are kindly working on, and then the media and outreach, which Dave and Julie are working on. And, we have our report coming up that we need some assistance on. I think we have some ideas of some people who can help with that. But I mean, if there's something that's interesting to you and you think is something that the board should get involved in, absolutely don't hesitate to flag that, because as we're all learning and figuring things out, and my hope and vision is that everybody here will have their thing, right? That each of the members will have the thing that they're particularly passionate about and can be helpful with and want to do, and we'll take that and move that forward. So if there's something, and as Mommy said, there's so many boxes in this house and there's so many rooms in this house that we can't even begin to get to all of them. So if we haven't put forward an idea, it's not because we wouldn't be open to it. We're totally open to everybody's ideas and want to empower people to get involved in stuff. So anyway, so thank you, Mommy, for saying that. I just want to say one other last thing, which is, although you're not actually required to let us know if you're not going to make a meeting, particularly now that we're going to be all in person, it would be helpful to know if you can't make it, because people won't wait for you to start something, or for some things we are going to need a quorum, and if we're not going to get a quorum, it would be useful to know ahead of time. So I would really appreciate it if people would let me and Mommy and Gary know, or me or Mommy or Gary, whatever works for you, one of the three of us or all three of us, if you think you're not going to make it as soon as you know that, or again, it just that way people are not waiting to start for other people, and we are really going to start trying to start on time. I think it's really important, particularly when we have speakers and stuff like that, for them not to have to wait for us. So that was the only other thing I was going to say. I would just appreciate it if people would let us know if they don't think they're going to make it. And last call for anything else. Otherwise,
Lisa, Dave Smith here. Just one quick thing. I'd be interested to follow up on Gary's idea of having, however many of us can make it, sort of just get together for a pizza and a beer or something, and maybe we can set that date when we're together on the 16th, you know, because it's easier sometimes
I got
to
to say something
like
here.
schedule while we're in person, or we could try to do it earlier. But I'm just throwing that out there that you know, if I'd be happy to try to do that. I think there's value to that. But you know, if it happens, it doesn't. If it does, it doesn't. Whatever. I'm just saying maybe when we're together on the 16th, that would be something we could decide upon.
Hey, this is Gary. I just want to add one comment to that. You know, I'm still thinking my way through this. I appreciate that, but if we are to do something like this, we need to establish some ground rules that there is no COB business. There is, you know, this is strictly just social, and so that's why I'm still thinking my way through this. You know, we need to comply with the county's rules, but that's what I shared with Lisa and Mummy. I'd like to do it, but I just want to make sure that we do it in the right context. And so I'm not in a hurry. But yeah, let's couple of us get together and talk about this. But we have, and I think we can do it. I think everybody here is professional enough. So it's something that and I'll reach out to a couple of you here. But my general thing is no COB discussion, business, nothing. Just people to people and in our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we do have to double check. I can assure you that this is a constant topic of conversation with Gary and Mummy and me as to how we can manage to get us all together. You know, we're just still trying to figure it out, but trust me, it's on our minds. Anyway, I have a very large and annoying dog over here who's forcing me to pet him, so which is difficult to do while I'm trying to run a meeting. So any other last questions, issues, topics? And please don't hesitate.
One last thing. Just in case folks didn't catch the conversation at the beginning of the meetings, I know folks were kind of trickling in when we were going over the hybrid meeting policy. So the COB, each commission does have to adopt a hybrid meeting or electronic meeting policy. It's a form policy, like you literally are just inserting commission name. It's standard, but I wanted to circulate that amongst you all so that we can pass one officially at our next meeting there, so that moving forward, we will have the ability to determine like what meetings are going to be virtual, what meetings are going to be in person, and that we are in compliance with Arlington County's electronic meetings policy. So each commission does have to pass one officially. So I'll circulate it beforehand, but I thought it would be helpful to have a presentation from Kendra so you would understand like what it was that you were looking at and what the purpose of it is. So just be on the lookout in your county email for that document. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself. And if I don't know the answer, I will circle back to Kendra and make sure we get any questions answered before we officially pass that at our next COB meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So any other last minute questions, issues? Okay, we're gonna almost finish on time, so that's fantastic. Anybody want to move to adjourn, hearing that there is no further business? Anybody want to make that motion?
I so move.
Okay, a second?
I second it.
Fantastic. So everybody in favor say aye.
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 Fantastic. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. It was a great conversation. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and see each other in a couple of weeks.
Good night.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.